for allowing us to come out to your house. Dear Lord, thank you for Andrew who will bring the word. And dear Lord, just let everything we say, do, that be done to glorify your Son Jesus. And we just love and praise you. Amen.
Amen. Let's go ahead and stand, and we're going to sing By and By, which is the Blue Book number 57. Say that for our sound engineer extraordinaire in the back tonight.
Okay, I've got two different ones.
Do the most upbeat one.
2019 and 2017.
Do the 19 version.
This is the best one.
Trials dark on every hand, every hand we stand. All the way that God would lead us to that blessed promised land. That He guides us with His eye, and we'll follow till we die. And we'll understand it better by and by. By and by, when the morning comes, when the saints of God are gathered home, we'll tell the story how we overcome, and we'll understand it better by and by. We are often destitute of the things that life demands, one of food and one of shelter, thirsty hills and barren lands. We are trusting in the Lord and according to God's word, and we'll understand it better by and by. By and by, when the morning comes, when the saints of God are gathered home, we'll tell the story how we overcome, and we'll understand it better by and by. Temptations, hidden snares often take us unawares, and our hearts are made to bleed for some thoughtless word or deed, and we wonder why we try to do our best, and we'll understand it better by and by. By and by, when the morning comes, when the saints of God are gathered home, we will tell the story how we overcome, and we'll understand it better by and by. What do you think about that? By and by. One of these days, you ever have something that just don't make sense? My dad died when I was 4 years old. My entire life, never had a father. There were several men that took that place. My Uncle CT is one of them. His birthday is here recently. Several other guys that stood up and kind of showed me. Jen Wells is another one. Guys who my father-in-law, that they showed me what a father is supposed to be and what it looked like. But a lot of times I'm like, why am I the one that don't have a dad? You know, why is this happening to me? There's a lot of people who go through life saying, why is this? Why do I have this affliction? Why do I have this problem? Why is this bothering me? Why does that bother me? The fact of the matter is, a lot of times you don't get the whole picture here. It's kind of funny. I didn't mean for this to tie into our lesson tonight, but we're talking about Joseph. You think about Joseph. Joseph wasn't doing anything wrong. He wound up being thrown into a hole. Then was going to be killed by his brothers and then sold into slavery to the Egyptians. He got lied on after being faithful and serving Potiphar well. He gets thrown into the prison, and while he's in prison, he does everything that he possibly can to do well. And even in this situation, he helps some people out. He says, "No, when God brings you out of here, don't forget me." And he got promptly forgotten. A lot of nights, I guarantee you, he went to bed going, "God, why? Why? God, why is this happening to me?" We may never understand it over here on this side. You ever put together a puzzle? Bobby, back before you went blind, did you ever put a puzzle together? Yeah. You ever notice that a lot of the puzzle pieces, they don't you put them together and you just look at them and say, that don't look anything like the front of the box. I don't see how these pieces fit into everything else. It don't make any sense to me. But you see, the problem is you don't know how all the other pieces fit together, and your perspective is a little bit too close. You need to be away from the painting to view the brushstrokes and the proper perspective, right? You have to be, God understands everything that's going on. And we look at situations and we say, I'm doing the best that I can. I don't know why I'm going through this. I don't know why I'm going through this heartache. And God's like, there's a reason. Well, I promise there's a reason. Sometimes on this side of the earth, we do find out the reason. If my dad would not have died, we wouldn't have moved back to West Virginia. We had to move back to West Virginia. If my dad had died, my mom never would have gotten remarried. She wouldn't have gotten remarried. I wouldn't have started spending weekends with my aunt and uncle. If I had started spending weekends there, God wouldn't have gotten a hold of me to solidify my faith. You know what I'm saying? God never would have, I would not have been in a position to be used of God. There's probably 1,000 other reasons too. I don't know what they are, but God does. We don't understand it now, but we will understand it better by and by. Anybody have any testimonies or anything before we get started today? All right, Rebecca, you going to run the verses for me?
Yeah, I got it.
All right, awesome. Well, let me pray real quick and we'll get started in today's lesson. Heavenly Father, and myself, I have no ability to do this. It's only through by the power of the Holy Spirit. I pray, Lord, that you would indwell me with the Holy Spirit. Help me to teach what I've studied and help me to do so in a way that helps us to understand your word and help us to draw meaning from what you've written down. Father, I pray that you would just forgive me of any sin I may have committed, Lord, so I'll be a vessel to be used of you. Help me to serve you with all my life. And I pray, Lord, for this church. Help us to grow. Help us to be found in doing your will. Pray this in Jesus' holy and precious name. Amen. We're in Genesis chapter number 42. Moving right along. Sorry, Benny, I should not have said anything that could be construed as a mother reference. All right, up to this story, we know that Joseph was taken by his brothers out of jealousy. They were going to kill him. Instead, they sold him as a slave, and then he was then taken to Potiphar's house. Meantime, his brothers took his coat and covered it in the blood of a kid and told their dad that they found this. I think this looks like our brother's coat, but is that your son's coat? We want you to be sure. And he says, obviously Joseph's dead. He was killed by a wild animal. And so they think they've gotten rid of their brother. We talked about how Judah and the whole family, really, all of the families just messed up. Every single one of them. We've got Simeon and Levi going and doing what they did in the town there where Dinah was raped. And we find out about what Judah did with Tamar. We look at all these things. Reuben laying with his dad's concubine. All these things these boys did because that's what the culture around them were doing. We as Christians have to be careful because we are in the world, but we are not of the world. It's okay for you to watch TV. It's not okay for you to imbibe the culture deeply to the point that the things that bother God don't bother you. The culture is okay with all kind of manner of sinfulness. From just the way that people talk, the way that people live, the constant lying, all that stuff, to the sexual perversion that is today, and it's all over the place. And it would take weeks to describe all the ways that men have become creative in breaking God's laws. My point is as Christians, we are countercultural. We should not be like the world. Joseph's brothers were just like the people around him in Canaan. They were accepted, and this is what people did. And the sins that they committed weren't even blinked at by the people of Canaan. But God had a different plan. Sometimes judgment comes for our own benefit, right? God, and through the process of this, is moving the children of Israel out of the land of Canaan for a period of time. He's doing so for a couple of reasons, but the most important is he needs to get these people out of the land before they cease to be an independent nation. God called Abraham. Abraham had Isaac. Isaac had Jacob. And Jacob, I don't know what he was thinking. He had all these kids, and he got so busy making money, he forgot about raising his kids. There's an old saying that the pastor's kids are usually the worst. Well, a lot of times it's because the pastor's so busy doing other stuff, he doesn't have time to tend to the things he needs to tend to with his kids. And I think that's what happened some with Joseph, or Jacob. So, last time we talked about how Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, how he saw the 7 kind of cattle coming out of the river Nile. They looked like they were plump and fat and just could barely walk. They were waddling around so big. It would make any rancher in Texas grin, the biggest grin you ever seen, see these kind of cattle. That's the kind you want to take to market because it charged by the pound, right? You charge it by the pound. Benny, put your mask on. And so, the point of it is, then he saw the 7 skinny cows come up, and then he saw the same thing with the grain. And we talked about the significance of the Nile River, but in the vision is there's going to be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And Joseph was put in charge of everything. And they went through the 7 years of plenty, and Joseph gets married and has some kids, and he's praising God and his children, and everything's going great. And then the dearth comes, the famine comes, and so now we're entering the chapter. Now the famine is not just in the land of Egypt; it's everywhere. Right? 42:1. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, why do you look upon one another? I can see them sitting around the table, right? Getting ready to have dinner. And there ain't no dinner to have because there's no food. And they're just staring at each other like, what are we going to do? I don't know. What do you think we ought to do? I don't know what we're going to do. And he's like, why y'all just staring at each other? It's time for you to do something. You need to get up and you need to go down to Egypt because there's food down there. So it had gotten around that Joseph had been selling corn. They don't know it's Joseph, okay? They don't know who he is. But they heard that Egypt has corn. No one else. He says, don't just sit around here. We need to do something. And he said, behold, I heard that there's corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy for us from thence that we may live and not die. This wasn't the first day there was no food. They had been running on empty for a while, and Jacob was like, we can't stand this way, guys. We got to do something. Y'all need to get down and go buy some grain. They had money, they didn't have food. So they're going to trade some of their money, which most more than likely was in the form of precious metals, right? They'd have some gold, they'd have some silver, whatever. And when you would go, they would weigh it out. Made it hard to make change, but you get the point. Coins were a more recent invention. Paper money even more recent than that. And now the fact that we do everything virtually and there is no such thing as people spend money that never existed. So Jacob's the leader. Israel's the leader. He looks around and he says, what we're doing isn't working. We got to do something different. Y'all go. One of the marks of a good leader is to evaluate the situation and make a decision. One of the problems people have is they get stuck in what is called the analysis of the paralysis of the analysis. They want to look and study the situation and try to avoid making any mistake. After a while, you can study a problem to death and never come up with a solution because guess what? There are a lot of unknowns in everything you do in life. Jacob realized this and he says, listen, just go buy some food. That's about the only play that I see. Go buy some food. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to Egypt to buy corn. So the boys did what they were told to do. They were all men at this point. Now they went together for safety purposes. They went together for protection. And probably because they didn't want to be around Dad, he was probably a little cranky since he hadn't ate anything for a while. But there's 10 of them. How many sons did Joseph have? Or Jacob have? 12.
Benjamin was a baby.
Benjamin stayed at home and they thought Joseph was dead, right? Verse 4, and Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob said, not with his brethren, for he said, least peradventure mischief befall. Benjamin's brother had gone on a mission for the dad and never came back. He brought back a bloody coat instead, and he's like, I'm not going to lose my boy. He's the only one I have left of Rachel, his favorite wife. I'm not going to lose him. Y'all go and see to this. He's going to stay here with me. He probably made an excuse of saying, well, somebody's got to take care of the property here. You know, I'm getting kind of old. I can't do it. But the real reason is he didn't want for Joseph. He didn't want for Benjamin to go. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. When they left out their homestead and they walked out the road, they weren't the only ones with their knapsacks on their back, right? There was a whole stream of people going because everybody was in the same boat. There was no water, therefore there was no crops, therefore there was no food. And so you're going to the place where you can buy food. So then they came among the rest of them. Now think about this. All these people coming to Egypt to buy food. Do you think that Egypt charged them normal prices, or do you think they jacked up the price just a little bit? You know what I'm saying? Think about how rich that Egypt would become in this situation, because they were the only ones around who had food. And here's the thing: you can skimp on about anything else, but if you have to have food to live, and they have food, your gold's not going to do you a whole lot of good if you're dead. So, you know, the point of it is that there was a lot of people buying food from Egypt, and this is, I think, one of the things that catapulted Egypt up into a world power status, right? You have to have money. This gave them a whole lot of money. Verse number 6, and Joseph was the governor over the land, and it was he that sold all the people in the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. They walk in with everybody else. Joseph's job every single day is to sit there and to figure out who to sell to. You said, what do you mean who to sell to? Why didn't you just have somebody lesser do it? Well, here's the thing. You don't want to be in a position of helping out people who then come and stab you in the back, right? He wanted to make sure he was going to sell the food to people who weren't going to become his enemies. And so, at the same time, I bet you he was looking at everybody and trying to suss them out and figure out how much money they had and all this and what they could. He was making sure that everything was going just right. He was in charge of this, and he saw his brothers come in and bow themselves down. His brothers won't recognize him. It has been 20 years since they sold him into slavery. It's been, well, back then he was just a boy of 17 years old. He's almost 40 now. He's bald. He's in Egypt. They shaved off all their hair in Egypt. He's wearing makeup. He's wearing all the garb of an Egyptian. And he doesn't look like his brother. He doesn't sound like his brother. And they, to be honest with you, a lot of the times when they sold slaves back then, the slaves had a kind of an expiration date. They were kind of used up pretty quickly, if you know what I'm saying. 20 years as a slave is probably, stretching imagination. They kind of think their brother's dead. So now the boys bow down before him. What kind of dream did Joseph have? What did he dream of when he was back home that made his brother so angry with him? You remember, he dreamed that they would all bow down before him. It wasn't him being arrogant. It's God sent him this dream. And now, right before him, he sees his brothers bow down before him, and the dream is fulfilled. Verse number 7, and Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but he made himself strange unto them, and spake gruffly to them. And he said unto them, whence come ye? And they said, from the land of Canaan, to buy them food. Joseph knew right off the bat. He saw them, he could recognize them. He knew who they were. They hadn't changed their manner of dress. They've gotten a little bit older, but they still had the same haircuts and everything else. He could recognize his brothers. He'd been around them his entire life. But you see, they didn't recognize him. And they said he made himself strange unto them. Well, here's the thing. If he would have walked up there, he says, Reuben, is that you? Simeon, hey guys. Obviously, if he would have made himself known, they would have recognized who he was immediately. He said he made himself strange unto them. He treated them like they were strangers. And he may have even changed the tone of his voice a little bit, but it's been a while. I mean, can you remember somebody sounds like 20 years before? It would be difficult. He had seen people from all over the area. He knew, he suspected, I bet you he suspected that eventually his brothers would come in there. So with every group, he's probably looking and saying, is that them? Is that them? He says, where are y'all from? He wasn't very nice. He says, he spake roughly. That means he was rude to them. Where are y'all from? He said, well, we're from Canaan. We're come here to buy food. And so then verse number 8, Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not. And Joseph remembered the dream which he dreamed to them, and said unto them, ye are spies to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. He said, looked at him and says, where y'all from? He said, well, we're from Canaan. We're here to buy food, sir. And he goes, he recognized him, and he remembered the dream, and he remembered how they treated him, and he remembered how they threw him in a pit. And he wanted to see if they were the same men that they were before, if they were still selfish and petty and all this. And he also remembered that they were going about before him. And so he's testing them out. And he says, you're not. You didn't come here to buy food. That's a lie. The reason you came is you're from one of our enemies, and you have come here to spy out the land. You come to see where, because of the famine, that we're weak, so we can be invaded. You can come and take our food. That's why you're really here. Now, accusing somebody of that is accusing somebody of something that is a capital offense. By that I mean they will kill you for this, right? Spying, even today, if you want to get a death sentence, it's one of the only things in the Constitution that specifies a death sentence is treason. Spying will get you killed. So when the most powerful man in the land looks at you and says you're a bunch of liars, you're spies, and you're coming here for our enemy, your knees are going to start to knock. Verse number 10, and they said unto him, nay, my Lord, but to buy food are thy servants come. We are one man's son, we are true men. Thy servants are no spies. They answered and said, no, we're not spies. Why would you think we're spies? We're true men, we're honest men. We're not deceiving you. We're all one man's son. We just come to buy food. We don't want to harm you at all. We're just one big family. They're trying to make sure. They're scared now. They're more scared now, I think, than when Joseph was in the bottom of that pit. They're more scared now than when Joseph was being frog marched back to Egypt in the caravan on the way to be sold to Potiphar. They were terrified because back then there was no judicial system. Right now we're talking about appointing a nominee to the Supreme Court. There was no such thing. The king was the Supreme Court, and he was the Congress, and he was the general of the army, and he was everything else. And whatever he said go, went. And Joseph was second in command. Joseph snapped his fingers, the guards would have killed him in a second. And that was real power that he had. And so when he made this accusation, it scared them. And they said, we're true men, we're not spies, we're honest, we're just one family. And he said unto them, nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. He doubled down. No, you're not one family. You're just a bunch of spies. And you know how we deal with spies here in Egypt. We're not very nice to spies here, boys. You came to the wrong place to try to take advantage of us. Can you imagine what his brothers were thinking? You ever had one of those moments where you went into school and you realize there was a test that you completely forgot to study for? Or the time you saw those blue lights flashing behind you and you're like, oh crap. Or the time you get that letter that says you owe something and you completely forgot to pay it. That sinking feeling in your stomach, I bet you they were feeling that all over the place. And they said, thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and the one is not. They said, look, there's 12 boys. There's just 12 of us, okay? And there's 10 here now. The youngest is back with Dad. Dad didn't want to bring him. And then our other baby brother, he's dead. So it's just us. We're just here to buy food. We don't want any trouble with you, sir. Joseph said unto them, That is it that I spake unto you, saying ye are spies. Hereby you shall be proved. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. When you swear by something, when they say we swear by Pharaoh, they're saying that he's saying basically by Pharaoh's life, that Pharaoh will die if I don't do this. And you don't, swearing by the king's life is one of the most surest ways you can possibly do. And the reason why we swear on the Bible when we get ready to give testimony is because we're saying basically, I swear to God, may he send my soul to hell if I lie. That's basically what you're saying when you put your hand on the Bible. It's a way of saying, I promise this is true. If Joseph just said, I swear by Pharaoh, none of y'all is going to go home unless your baby brother comes back here. Why did he want to see Benjamin? You see, these boys were his half brothers. They weren't his whole brothers, they were his half brothers. Benjamin was his only whole brother. And he and Benjamin shared some things together, and they were closer than the other boys. And he wanted to see Benjamin, and he figured that since they treated him badly, they probably treated Benjamin badly as well. Send one of you and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, doubles down again by the life of Pharaoh. Ye are surely spies. And he put them all together in the ward for 3 days. All right, boys. All right. You say y'all one big happy family. Is that it? You're not spies. You're not just part of the military out here that's getting ready to invade Egypt. Fine. You're going to prove what you're saying. You're going to go get your youngest brother, and you're going to bring him back here to prove yourself to me. Oh, and by the way, one of you is going to go get him, and the rest of you are going to be in prison until they get back. And then, just to underscore, just to drive it home, he says, oh, before I let you go, y'all going to do some time in the big house. He's going to put them in jail. He's going to put them in prison. He's not going to let them out. And he's doing this for several reasons. Number one, he's trying to scare them. See, the thing is when people are extreme emotions tend to reveal the character of a person. Somebody can talk real brave, but when danger comes, if they run away from danger, you can see who they really are. Oftentimes, selfishness. I mean, you've heard stories of generals, running from the face of the battle, but yet the private who everyone looks down upon, stands to the last minute fighting bravely, right? Danger and circumstances like this have a tendency of revealing your true character. So he puts them in prison for 3 days. One of you is going to go back, and the rest of you are going to stay. And the implication here is that if you don't come back, I'm going to kill him. And if I find out you're lying, I'm going to kill him. Do you think they slept much for 3 days? Do you think that they might have had to change their clothes? I mean, they would have been in a bad situation. These guys who were so callous and so brave to their little brother who didn't stand a chance against them, now when he has the power and they don't, they're in a completely helpless state.
I think they're kind of like, the saying, scared straight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of like, holy crap, Dad's really going to kill us. We're in this situation, and he wants us to bring Benjamin. Boys, we can't do that. We've already done this thing to his to Joseph. And
You're getting ahead of yourself.
Huh?
You haven't got there yet.
Well, I mean, they're sitting in there saying this stuff.
Well, I mean, they're sitting there, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? They said, Dad's not going to send Benjamin. He's not going to send him. He would rather us die than he send Benjamin. He's not going to, well, Dad will do it for the lot of us. He will. No, he won't do it. He won't do it. And they were sitting there just tore up and staying up at night and just worried to death about the situation. Verse number 18. And Joseph said unto them the third day. By the way, you notice the third day? There's some references here that are veiled references to Jesus, right? Joseph, I said, is a type and picture of Jesus. And the boys spent, the children of Israel spent 3 days in prison, and Jesus spent 3 days in the tomb. Just pointing it out. This do and live. Okay, if somebody says do this and you'll live, what's the implication of the converse? So this is used. In other words, if you don't do this, what will you do? Die, right? So when I said he was threatening their lives, that's exactly what he was saying. Do this and live, for I fear God. Now, Pharaoh or Pharaoh's equivalent in Egypt would not have said, I fear God. Who would they have feared? I fear the gods, right? They were polytheistic. They believed in Ra and Osiris and all that mumbo-jumbo, river Styx and all that. So the point of it is that he said, for I fear God. He let it slip. Even now, in his position as over these guys, he's saying, listen, I fear God. And he did. Serving God was important to Joseph. And he says, I fear God. And he gave him a hint of who he was, but they didn't pick up on it. If ye be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. Go ye carry the corn of your family of your houses, but bring your youngest brother unto me, so shall your words be verified, and ye shall not die. And they did so. If you're really one family, if you're just men in one family, then I'm going to send you back home with food, because I know there's a famine going on. I'm going to send you back home with your food. He says, but one of you is going to stay here as a hostage for me, and because otherwise I don't think I'll ever see your scrawny faces again. He says, but when you come back, you better bring your brother. Verse number 21. And they said one to another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother, and that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear him. Therefore this distress has come. They're like, don't you remember when he was in the hole? When he was begging us, guys, don't do this to me. Guys, don't do this. Well, what are you doing? You don't have to do this. We're one family. Why? Because we ignored him, because we turned our noses up at him, we didn't listen to him, we didn't have any compassion. God is turning this around on us. We are getting judged. Here's the fact. And they realized it. And a lot of times Christians forget it. We are so much into forgiveness, we forget that there is a biblical precedent. I preached about it before. Reaping and sowing. The secular culture says what goes around comes around, right? The fact of the matter is, God, most of the time in this life, will bring judgment for people. There will be consequences of their behavior in this life. If you are a thief, chances are you're going to be stolen from. If those who live by the sword, the Bible says, die by the sword. If somebody lives a life of selfishness and excess, there's a reason why most of your Hollywood stars don't live to be a ripe old age. They will wind up keeling over of a drug overdose or killing themselves. Because what goes around comes around. They looked at what happened, what they did to Joseph, and they said, we turned our back on our brother. This is why this is happening to us. They're right in several different reasons. God had elevated Joseph up to this position. They did something that was the equivalent of putting him on death row. You understand? By selling him as a slave, life was cheap back then, and that most of the slaves would work themselves to death in just a few years. It was a hard, grueling existence. They could care less about the future of their brother. They were jealous of him, they hated him, and they at the first opportunity, threw him under the bus, so to speak. And they said, this is why this has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, I love this, saying, spake I not unto you, saying, do not sin against the child, and you will not hear. I told you at the time, don't mess with him. You shouldn't do this junk. This is just stupid. I'm the oldest. You should listen to me. But no, you're not going to do, y'all. Could he have stopped it? If he really wanted to, I bet you he could have, but he didn't. But he was right. He said, listen, I told you not to mess with the boy. Remember, he was the one who was going to save him out of the pit. He was going to wait until the brothers turned their back. He's going to rescue him. And behold, also his blood is required. They believed he was dead. They said, we sold him into slavery and he died, and God is going to require of us his blood. Remember, God is not mocked. Whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. There is forgiveness in Jesus. There is forgiveness in God. But don't think for a second that temporal behaviors don't have temporal consequences. If you go and you smack somebody and you ask for forgiveness, God will forgive you, but the police are also going to see it, right? And they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter. So as they were talking, he was listening to them. He had been speaking all this time through an interpreter and acting as though he didn't understand a word they said. It's like they were speaking Spanish and he was talking with a hillbilly accent. And they felt free to talk around him when the interpreter wasn't around, but he understood every word that they said. And he listened to them, and they regret what they did, and they realized that it was a horrible thing that they did, and they regretted. Not just the circumstance. I believe that they regretted the consequences, but they also regretted what they did. Verse number 24. And he turned himself about from them and wept, and returned to them again and communed with them, and took from them Simeon and bound him before their eyes. So they're saying all this, and it was just too much. So he turns around, and he walks away, and he goes into a room somewhere, and he cries. He cries because these boys who for years he was wondering, why did they do this? Why do they hate me so much? And he's wondering, what would I do if I had a what would you do if you had a chance to confront the people who sold you into slavery and put you on a course for going through all the heartache that he went through? Maybe, I don't know if he would stay up late at night thinking, man, if I ever got my hands on that Levi again, if I got a hands on Simeon, if I could just get a hold of him, I don't think he had that, but I guarantee you some of those thoughts passed through his mind. But now here they are saying, we messed up, we should never have done that, it was wrong of us, and they admitted their guilt. And they didn't do it to him because they didn't think he could hear. They didn't think he could understand. They were just talking amongst themselves. The most honest talk that you'll ever hear is when somebody doesn't think you can hear it. They're not putting on any airs. So what he did is he came after he cried and reapplied his eye makeup, because there was a eye makeup in Egypt. He comes back in and he talks to them for a while, communes with them, and then he says, all right, we're going to bind up Simeon. Some of the commentators think Simeon volunteered, and maybe they drew straws, or maybe Joseph said, yeah, that's what we're going to tie up. But they tie him up in front of him. He's going to be thrown into prison, and he's going to sit there until they bring back the brother. And Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with corn and to restore every man's money into the sack and to give them their provisions along the way. And thus he did unto them. So he was already saying, all right, he called over his guy and said, hey, listen, go ahead and give them the food, but go ahead and put the money back in the bags. And don't tell them. Don't let them know. I don't want them to know about this. Just put the money back in the bags and send them on their way. And so they left. Can you imagine what they felt like when they left? They went into Egypt with hope of getting food, and they're coming back with food, but there's one brother short. I mean, think about it. What are we going to tell Dad? I mean, this is the second time we've lost a brother. Right? The first time Joseph, he was really upset with us. It took him he never really did get over it. It took him a long time to get to the point where everything was back to normal again. And now Simeon's they were really upset. They left out early in the morning, I bet you $1, because when you're traveling, you want to get as much traveling in as you can in the daytime. It was very dangerous traveling. It's kind of dangerous today, but not anything like it was back then. Back then, they did not have a highway patrol to keep down on bandits. You traveled in large groups of people and hoped that nobody would beat you over the head and take your stuff. None of them set out. They were thinking, what are we going to tell Dad? They traveled all day long, just stewing over. Maybe they made some comments. Maybe they tried to come up with a plan. How are we going to convince Dad that we can take Benjamin? What are we going to do? Simeon's back there in jail. He can't stay there forever. I don't know how long that dude is going to allow him to stay in jail before he kills him. I don't know what's going on. They did not have long-term prison sentences back then. Usually, back then, if you did something, they killed you. Or they beat you, but they did not put you in prison for long periods of time. So after all day long, they pull up to the inn. One of the brothers doesn't tell us which one gets who gets the food down and says, I need to give my donkey something to eat. He opens up the bag, and his blood runs cold. They went to Egypt to buy food. And there in the bag was all the money that he spent for that food. It's one thing to be spies, and you just told them, say, listen, we're honest men. We're not spies. We're just here to buy food. And you open up your bag, and your money's back in the bag. They're going to notice that much money's missing. They're going to notice that and so he was like, oh no. Later their eyes were corn and departed thence, and they came, one of them opened his sack to give his ass provender. In the end, he espied his money, for behold, it was in the sack's mouth. And he said unto his brethren, my money is restored, and lo, it is even in my sack. And their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this that God has done unto us? What is God doing? God took our money from Pharaoh, and he put it back where there's no chance. Before, maybe we could talk him into, I don't know, what are we going to do? I mean, think about it. If the guy was that mad, you coming up just to buy corn, just to buy food, what do you think is going to happen when your money disappears from the treasury? Verse number 29, and they came unto Jacob their father, unto the land of Canaan, and they told him all that befall him, saying, the man who is the Lord of the land spake roughly to us, and took us for spies of the country. And we said unto him, we are true men, we are no spies. We be 12 brethren, sons of our father, one is not, the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. And the man, the Lord of the country, said unto us, hereby I shall know that ye are true men. Leave one of your brethren here with me, and take food for the famine for your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother unto me, and then I shall know that you are no spies. But ye are true men, so I will deliver you your brother, and ye shall traffic in the land. And it came to pass, as they emptied their sacks, and behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. So they tell the whole story to the dad. And when they open up the sacks, every one of their money is there. Now they get really afraid. This is Egypt. They have an army. They have the ability to hunt you down. And here they are. They spent a lot of money buying this food. And everybody's money was back in the sack. And they were extremely afraid. They were afraid because they didn't know how long this famine was going to go on. They may have to go back and buy more food. And when they did, if Egypt's the only place in town and you showed back up and you robbed from them last time, what are they going to do to you? They were scared to death. And Jacob, their father, said unto him, me have ye bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, Simeon is not, and that ye will take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. He says, look, Simeon's as good as dead. Y'all don't kill Joseph's dead. Now Simeon's as good as dead. You want to take Benjamin? You want to take Benjamin back? The money's in the bag. They're not going to let you go. You know what they're going to do to you. You walk back in there, they're going to kill you. And they're going to kill Benjamin. I won't have any children. Don't do this to me. And Reuben spake unto his father, saying, slay my 2 sons, if I bring them not to thee. Deliver him into my hands, and I will bring him to thee again. He said, Dad, I promise you, with all that's in me, I will bring Benjamin back to you. Listen, I'm not going to let anything happen to him. I'm so sure of that. You see my 2 boys over here? If I don't come back, you can kill them. What a stupid thing to say. You go to the grandfather and say, if your son dies, do you kill your grandchildren? Like that's going to be a ruin. Said, man, I didn't like those kids anyway. I mean, he was trying to show them how serious he was. And he was saying, listen, I promise on the life of my own children, I will bring your child back. He was trying to do the only thing that he could think of. He's like, I got to save Simeon. And maybe if we bring back the money and say, I think there's been a mix-up, sir. Look, here's all the money back. And look, here's our brother. And we brought you a little bit for interest, just in case you think there's something going on. We don't want any more food or anything from you. I just want to make everything right. He was thinking in his mind, maybe I could somehow figure out a way to make this all right. And he came up with that as the best way he could explain to his dad, I'll bring you back, Dad. But trust me, you know how much I love them kids. I would not do anything. But if I don't make it back with Benjamin, you can kill them. He's saying, that's how sure I am. Was he really sure? Probably not. That's the only thing he could think of. And he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befalls him by the way which ye go, then ye shall bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. Jacob was an older man at this point. He's like, you don't understand. If you take him and he dies, I don't think I can deal with that. I don't think I could survive that. If that happens, it will kill me. I'll take my old gray hair, put me in the grave if that boy dies. He isn't going. He isn't going. Get it out of your head. They probably already killed Simeon anyway, so there's no use of you going back. Plus, the money's in the bag. Do you think that maybe Joseph put the money there for two reasons? One, because he really didn't want to take the money of his family. But two, is a test to see what his brothers would do. Would they sacrifice their younger brother to save their own skins? How would they act? So here they are at home. They have some food. Famine's awful. They don't know how long this food's going to last. They're scared to death. They're in an awkward position. But what they don't know, what they don't realize, is that all this is happening for a purpose. And that this is a test from Joseph to them, to measure their mettle, to see if they are, as they say, true men, or if they're the liars that he remembered as his youth. We're going to find out in the next chapter what happens. And but the whole fact of the matter is, when you see this, Joseph wasn't trying to be cruel to these people. He really wasn't. He had the power, if he wanted to take them and to have them tortured to death slowly and painfully. They were really good at that back in Egypt. Most of your ancient cultures were very good. They had people whose job it was to torture people for weeks and weeks and weeks, keep them alive. It wasn't until the modern time that the idea of the death penalty was death. Usually death was seen as the end of the punishment, but that was at the end of the punishment. They would do all kind of horrible and nasty things to you to cause you to suffer as much as humanly possible.
Could you imagine, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
You're fine.
Simeon, because it would have taken weeks to get from Canaan to Egypt. Weeks. And every day, him thinking, is this my last day? Am I in prison? And is he going to kill me tomorrow? Is he going to kill me today? Every day.
I have a feeling, with the way that Joseph is, that Simeon, after the boys left, he cut the bounds and put them under house arrest somewhere. So he had a kind of cushy way of waiting. But yeah, definitely Simeon was sitting there thinking every single day, am I going to make it? They experienced a little bit, just a little bit of what Joseph went through all those years. And he did it not to be mean. Like I said, if he wanted to, he could really have gotten even with them. I mean, super easy. It would have been snapping his fingers, and it would have been over. But he didn't. He loved his brothers. Even after what they did, he still loved his brothers. We're going to find out the reason why Joseph was where he was. And like I said, that's a few chapters away. Is because God used him to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Canaan, to protect them from the people of the land. Because God had a purpose in Israel, to become a distinct people, a very special people, through which he would give us the Bible. Remember, at this time, none of this was written down yet. Moses wrote this down when they left Egypt. So this is stuff that happened before Moses even wrote it down. I believe that there were chronicles, there were notes, there was stuff being written down like that. But I'm saying that the Bible hadn't even been written yet. Israel as a nation had to be a separate people. And the way that God designed for them to is to pull them out of the land and put them somewhere else. Christians, we are pulled out of the world. And we are made to be something else, so that we don't conform ourselves to the image of the world, but conform ourselves to Christ. In the land of Goshen, the children of Israel, slaves, could not conform to the Egyptians, and they could not conform to the children of the land of Canaan. They were their own distinct thing. And that was a purpose and a reason. God was also giving the children of Canaan 400 years to repent. I know the way God is, God would have sent men and prophets to them saying, hey, listen, repent before it's too late. But of course they did not. And then judgment came in the hand of Israel. But God has a purpose and a plan for everything that happened. Joseph would never be in the palace if he wasn't first in the pit. He would never be in a position to save people from the famine if he was never in prison to talk to the butler, right? Things happen in your life for a reason. And sometimes, a lot of times, there's more than one reason. Joseph went through this stuff to mature him, to season him, and to build the character so that when he's wielding this power, when you're wielding this amount of power, it takes a lot of character. Because think about how easy it would be for you to give in to your selfishness, to give in to your pettiness, to give in to the sinfulness of the human heart. There has to be some character there. And I hate to say this, the Bible says, tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. The way you develop that character a lot of times is by going through difficult times. You go to the gym and you put the weight on the bench press to be 5 pounds. You can exercise for all day long. You're not going to gain any muscle. It's only through resistance that you build up muscle. You know how a diamond is formed? The diamond is formed when the earth is pressing against this lump of coal with a great deal of pressure and a great deal of heat. That's when a diamond is formed. When you take silver and you put it in a smelter's fire, and what you're doing is you're purifying that silver. You're burning off the impurities, and the impurities will go to the top, and you keep scooping it off until you can see your reflection in the silver. God does the same thing in our lives. A lot of times we go through difficulty and heartache, we go through trouble and trials. All of those are for His own purpose and for His own glory, as Romans 8:28 says. And there's a reason. We may not understand it on this side of glory. It may take you 1,000 years of God explaining it to you for you finally to get it. Because I guarantee you, God is God, and His plans are good. I laugh sometimes. You realize that when Charles Darwin came up with that cockamamie theory of evolution, mostly the common descent, everything comes from a single cell. His idea at the time was that cells were just bags of protoplasm, basically bags of jelly. He didn't understand how complicated everything was. The more that we learn things are complicated. Biddy's studying the cell right now. He's building a model cell this week. And there's the Golgi apparatus, and there's the endoplasmic reticulum, there's the nucleus, there's mitochondria, there's all kinds of little things in there. And when you look inside of the cell, it's an entire little factory, and there's no way it could just happen. And there's all these things that are happening just the right way. And it amazes you with that amount of complexity. And then every time we increase the power magnification of a magnifying glass or microscope, so I'm just going to say, and you see a little bit deeper, we see that the cell is made up of DNA, which is basically a computer code. Do you realize this? Information. Okay, there's words on the screen. Okay? The words on the screen, they convey information. But it's the specific combination of letters arranged in a specific way that are used to communicate something. I'm not saying this correctly. You can have a book of 1,000 pages, and it can have a wonderful story in it, or it can be complete gibberish and have the exact same weight, the exact same shape, the exact same number of letters. In other words, information is encoded through a medium. Do you understand? DNA contains information. It's not just physical. There's something beyond physical. We know that coders write code, right? So there's something that exists beyond that. So what my point on all this is that the more we look at things, the more complicated life is. I guarantee you, to wrap it back into what I was saying, God's plans for us obviously are not just super simple. There's not just a single variable that's going on. You may never be able to understand on this side of eternity, but I guarantee you one day God will explain it to you. And it may take you 1,000 years to figure out why that is, because there's so many things going on at the same time. But God, who created the cell and also created the black hole and created the stars and everything else that's in this universe, He also knows who you are, and He loves you. And His plan is for His glory and your good. We can trust in that. Joseph did, and it worked out for him. Any comments? All right, next week we're going to go into chapter 43. I'm going to see if I can start combining the chapters together so we can get done a little bit faster. But it seems it works out pretty well one chapter a night. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All hearts and minds free. Hey, Benny, would you dismiss us?